Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for those who did jump on. Again, this is being recorded because I do want people to get the opportunity to hop on. And yeah, listen, that's my whole like coaching motto is like on your own pace at your own time. So share it with your friends, pass it along, and I'll share my YouTube channel like after. But anyway, I have not met Emily officially yet. I met her through, well, that's a whole nother story, but I won't get into that. The point is,
welcome, Emily, is the point.
I need to introduce myself properly. I'm Crystal, and I just launched KD Coaching within the last 5 months, thanks to Jason. And I'll let you introduce yourself in a second. But today we're doing the topic on anger. I've reached my boiling point. And the goal, like I put in the chat, was to, she says, happy to be here. I'm happy to have you. So the main objective was to have you guys leave with a better understanding of anger, not only for yourself, but for your other relationships, and how to understand your triggers. And yeah, Jason has a lot of other material research and understanding anger as a learned behavior. So that'll be interesting to talk about that too. And just the ways it shows up in our life so that we can, I don't know, be more educated about it. I think it's interesting because we don't talk about it a lot. When we think of mental health, we think of depression, anxiety. Those are kind of like the go-tos, but anger comes in many forms. So that's my rant. But for Mental Health Awareness Month, I just wanted to say that I will be doing things weekly just so that people can be heard and feel supported. So feel free to hop on. I'll have additional events all the way out to the end of the month. So that's my introduction. Jason.
Hello, everyone. Jason Vastardis, LPC. Glad to be a recurring guest on Crystal's show. I'm going to call it a show. I don't know what else to call it. Crystal's
my platform.
Your platform. And I always had the same ritual. I always hate that I agree to this before it happens, get stressed out about it, and walk away so happy I do it. So today is no exception. So really enjoying talking about a specific topic. Really enjoy thinking about it, conversing, theorizing about it, and love the questions from audience members. We have some audience members here, so that's great.
Yeah, feel free to, if you can't show your camera, show your face, to ask questions, type, engage on the side. There's a chat open up that, yeah, we can both see it. So welcome.
Welcome.
So let me ask you this. What made you, obviously I said like there's reasons why we wanted to bring it up, but like for you specifically, like what was the I don't want to say trigger, the main purpose behind you picking this out of the laundry list of topics we have?
I think more than ever, anger is showing up in so many ways. There's anger about stuff we can't control. There's anger about politics. There's anger about pandemic. There's anger about so many things. And I see it more and more online, how people talk to each other. There's just so much rage and anger. And one of the things is, what I see with the anger is the idea that the other person is an other. There's someone else, there's someone different. And it like justifies this kind of rage. And what I see lessening is a shared humanity, and more about, well, you're someone so different. I don't trust you, I don't like you, and I'm going to throw a lot of anger and hate towards you. And more personally, for me, anger has been a lifelong battle. I think anger has been a common thread. It's been in every relationship I've ever had. It's ended relationships for both friends and romantic. It's caused division in my family. I've lost jobs due to anger and not controlling myself. So, it's a very personal topic in that sense. It hits close to home. I'm very happy how much healing I've had around this topic, how much evolution I've had. And I feel like I'm in a pretty good place, but I'm still very far from where I'd like to be with anger. Still get angry a lot. I want to look at that. So.
Yes. And it's, I'm going to go here. One of the 4 biggest triggers for relapse, drugs and alcohol, right?
Right.
I remember that today, like hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Halt. Stop what you're
Yeah.
doing. Right.
Yeah.
Anger.
But yeah, I'd be interested to see what you found, obviously. But another thing is, it's interesting because that's the most, I don't know how to say, like, most reactive. Like, we see it out of all the other emotions, the quickest and the easiest to just, it's the easiest to discern, right? But it's not always the primary emotion, right?
Yeah.
So, like, our pain drives the anger, our resentment, I don't want to say resentment, let's take it a couple, let me go in a different direction. Fear, pain, and frustration, like, those are like the three biggest things I would say that usually drive it. So if anybody on here can relate to that, feeling some kind of pain, whether it's in your past or currently, a fear of something that you can't control, or some kind of frustration with the situation that you also cannot control, like, those three things right there could be a root.
And someone in the chat said anxiety is a huge trigger for anger.
Yes.
And I think that's such a good point, because physiologically, and of course, things just got being out of my control. And I think anxiety and things being out of my control go hand in hand. Right. So loss of control, powerlessness, anxiety, and anger. Because anger and anxiety are very similar physiologically. Right. So one of the things I want to talk about is the physiology of anger. Well, what is it? Why do we have it?
Yeah. I'm listening. I'm all ears.
And
wait, for the record, anxiety goes hand in hand with fear. You know that.
And fear, I look at as the opposing emotion. So think of stress and anxiety as a neutral term. Your body's jacked. Fear says, I need to run from the experience to survive. Anger says, I need to fight the experience to survive. They're both from the same place, though, which is survival. So my understanding of both fear and anxiety, or fear and anger, is that they both are ways to survive something.
Survival.
So if you just Google the definition of anger, the simple definition is a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility, right? So why do we have it? And anger is literally how people used to survive. When there was a threat that's dangerous, if they were too afraid and they couldn't fight it, let's say it was an animal or an opposing person trying to kill them, anger is how they survived it. They got angry enough to fight what it is. And I look at anger in a really primitive way as a survival mechanism, right? It's a survival mechanism that is struggling to find its place in the modern world when a lot of our needs are met, or at least in certain areas, a lot of people's needs are met, but yet we still have those drives. So we have this survival instinct that doesn't quite always have a home, and these urges come out, and we're trying to navigate them in the world where there's a lot of mixed messages of anger, right? So something I want to think about is, what are some ways we were taught about what anger is? So Crystal, when you were a child, from the best you can remember, what do you remember being taught about what anger is and qualities about anger, like good, bad, or other things?
You know, it's crazy because I didn't realize till I was an adult how much I was around it, to be honest.
Yep.
And I wasn't a fighter. I would fight, like, literally, like, run up to the bathroom, stay in the room. And so now as an adult, whenever people raise their voice, or I hear an argument, I either laugh or, I feel like my inner child comes out in a weird way. Like, I don't know how to deal with it. I actually don't. And it's always been a thing, but I think it stemmed from that because my instinct wasn't to attack back or get in the middle, because I was, a kid. And when you see adults fighting and things like that, like, it started right there. So that's really interesting. And I always try and, like, figure out how I can combat that different now, but I'm just naturally not an aggressive person. So I wonder if it just stemmed from that.
Right. But child stuff, again, I look at this child stuff and I'm so glad it's such a great example you did. They're instincts we formed that they show up as an adult, and the goal isn't to change our instincts. The goal is to change our reaction to these instincts, right? So your instinct, let's say if someone raised their voice, is to maybe freeze or withdraw. And so the healing would be to look at, okay, that's my instinct. what is an alternative thing I can do instead in the face of anger, right? And how can I navigate an angry situation?
Yeah, so I think for me, one thing I started to do, and this might help everybody else, is like just communicate to the other person, like exactly what I just said to you, right? Or, hey, it's making me feel this way,
right?
Instead of running or laughing or doing things that kind of provoke the person. So, and it's funny, I was going to get to that later, obviously, like that's a key, is communication, to just let somebody know that you're feeling challenged, or that something's making you feel angry, anxious, fearful. And communication is really hard. We say it's so important, but it's really, really hard to do, especially it makes things uncomfortable,
And one thing I've noticed with my clients when they're really angry is, more than anything else, they want their anger to be heard and acknowledged, that there's a truth to it, that it's a fair emotion to feel in what they're experiencing. And again, I think that goes back to survival. When people are angry about something, there's an element of it that has something to do with their survival or well-being.
Yep.
And if you can validate that, there tends to be a softening effect, because the defense is no longer needed. If you look at anger as a form of a defense, it's protective. You address the thing they're trying to protect, and then the anger tends to subside. So I've had a lot of good success with really angry clients, looking at what are they protecting? Is it their pride? Is it their material well-being? Is it a relationship that feels threatened? Is it a boundary that feels violated? That's that's the work.
Yeah, so let's ask them that. If anybody wants to type in the chat, if strikes a gets you thinking at all. So there was two things. You asked about what have you learned about it?
Yeah, where were some of the messages? So for example,
messages that have been sent about anger.
Like, for example, some households, anger was praised. It demonstrated power. So when there was an outburst, in a subtle way, the family would reward it, because they would either accommodate the anger, or they would gain respect for the person or whatnot. So anger gets reinforced. In other families, it was very shamed. So there's a lot of shame around anger. So it gets suppressed, right? So one of the things is, well, what does healthy anger look like? Because anger, I probably should have opened this. I do not believe anger is a bad emotion. I think one of the big myths about anger is that it's bad or toxic. And it's not the anger that's bad or toxic. It's how we channel it. That's the key. How do we navigate our anger? Because there, in my opinion, is things that are righteous to be angry about, right? Civil injustice, oppression, things that are warranting anger. But it's what we do with our anger that either makes it toxic and healthy, or useful and motivating. Because anger, above anything else, it's a motivational power. When we're angry, we get things done more likely than we're not angry. So anger.
Wait, so I'm going to ask you for more examples of that in a second, but I want to backtrack for a minute, because you just said a lot.
Yeah. Please always slow me down and break what I say into pieces.
Okay, so the first thing for people to consider is the messages that have been sent about anger, thinking back to your childhood, not even that far, but how it was, like Jason said, reinforced, or was it a shameful thing? Was it a way to get your needs met? Was it creating an environment of fear? Like what did that look like for you? And then Jason, how do you think that affects how we end up living our life as adults?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, how much permission do we have to be angry? Right? How much permission were we given throughout our lives to be angry? And if you're on the side where it was really praised, you might be more vulnerable to explosion. And if you're on the side that was shamed about it, you're more likely to be depressed, suppressed, reserved. And we got a great comment from Allison. Anger can also be an easier or more comfortable emotional state, as opposed to fear, vulnerability, anxiety. Perfect, Allison. Hit it down the head.
Oh, like a defense?
Anger is probably, there's a lot of situations, especially as a man. So I think one of the things is about gender, and I want to get to gender and differences of anger.
Yeah.
Throughout my life, I was allowed to be angry or okay. No one ever questioned anger okay. When I got sad, I got a lot of pushback. When I said afraid, I got a lot of pushback. And when I was vulnerable, I got a lot of pushback. All right. So in other words, those were more uncomfortable emotional states for me as a man. And let me see what Emily says. My parents always referred to me as the mean girl, almost like it defined who I am. So I always been a relatively aggressive person. Now I'm working on being more aware of my aggression and why I feel like I need aggression. So right here, Emily's bringing up a good point about identity. How many people have told us who we are as a person when it comes to anger? You're an angry person. And it gets intertwined with our identity, right? So if we believe we're an angry person, are we more likely, more vulnerable to being angry? Are we more likely and vulnerable to being aggressive because we believe that's what we are?
So does it start with what she said, like trying to be more aware and like changing your perspective about you not being angry? It's just a behavior that it could be changed.
So the big division is state versus trait. Is this a trait of mine, a personality trait or a character trait that's fixed, or is it a state of mind? And with anger, I think there's two truths at the same time, right? So trait versus state. So with
okay, so Emily, I'm going to challenge you to think about that a little bit. Is it your trait or just a state of mind that can be worked on? Because then with that gives you some hope that like you're not that mean person.
Or better yet, who are you when you're not angry? Is a question I love asking people.
Who are you when you're not angry?
Yeah, Emily, describe yourself when you're not angry.
Who are you when you're not angry?
How do you think? How do you feel when you're not angry?
It's so funny because it's exactly what Allison said. Like, you don't want people to see that soft side of you, because then with that comes like, yeah, I'm a pushover, or people can take advantage. It's our defense kind of getting crumbled. And
Joshua shared that anger started division in his household. And absolutely, again, mischanneled anger or miscommunicated anger is so destructive. And that's what I think I want to help differentiate between anger and behavior, or anger and how we channel it. Because anger is a healthy emotion to something unhealthy, is another way of putting it. It's a healthy response to something toxic and unjust, threatening, or whatnot. But the behaviors can be very, very destructive. And they also can take a toll on our body. Chronic anger affects immune system, it affects blood flow, it affects inflammation in the body. Some of the research I found says people are even more vulnerable to heart issues and even lung issues, which I wouldn't have thought of. But the body gets inflamed literally when you're angry a lot. And inflammation is linked to all sorts of health issues. So chronic anger takes a toll. It drains our body. Right.
I picture that like emoji thing from that movie, Inside Out, where his head blows off.
Yeah.
You know
Inside Out. The five emotions, the Pixar movie.
Yeah, anger, his head just literally busts open. And I picture that with our heart. It's like your blood pressure raises, like nothing good comes out of that. Like physiologically. Yeah. Yeah, so I like that. It brought up identity and then being vulnerable.
And then which emotions are people more comfortable with being? So when I think about Parkside, lovely Methadone Parkside, which of course we have another guest, Allison, who also worked at lovely Methadone Parkside. Anger was the most common emotion I saw.
Oh yeah.
Every day. And I have a really distinct memory where my anger got reinforced positively. I had a terrible group. All the clients were awful. They were giving me crap, and I just dug into them. I was screaming at them, shouting, cursing, and a supervisor walked by and heard it all. And when I left that group, they said, "That's how you do it. Keep them strict, keep a tight rule. You got to keep them in check." And although it was effective in the short term, it ultimately reinforced the very thing I wanted to help them heal from, which is only using rage as a control mechanism and not allowing for other feelings.
Definitely.
Right. So my rage got reinforced and it was praised, which made me vulnerable to doing it more.
Got it.
Emily, definitely a state of mind, and a lot of my anger is reaction. I feel guilty about it almost immediately after I calm down. So the question is, Emily, what is the part of your anger you feel guilty about? Is it the fact that you got angry in the first place, or what you said, or what you did? How I react?
Yeah, what she does. Yeah.
What you do. Okay. So how do we express anger in a healthy way? Healthy
Great
anger.
question, Jason. Sorry, guys, I'm eating, by the way.
Krista's gonna eat, so I'll just keep talking. Again, I think the number one goal is to talk about what it is you're trying to protect when you're angry. If you can name that thing you're trying to protect, whether it's your confidence, your pride, your ego, something like that, your time, your boundaries, you're going to feel a lot different than if you just yell, right? If you just act on it. So being able to identify what it is you're actually trying to protect with your anger, you're going to be more effective communicating ways with people you care about in a way that doesn't feel as anger invoking. So for example.
Wait, yeah, I want to think about that before. Oh, give me your example. Go ahead.
Well, what's the last thing that made you angry?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, Jason, you sure you want to ask me that right now?
I especially want to ask her right now.
Oh my God.
The last thing, not just normal,
confirm.
not just peeved. I mean, what's the last thing that made you angry?
Dude, I can't.
Allison can share it. Okay, Allison, what's the last thing that made you
Allison.
angry?
We got to give her a minute.
Well, wait.
No, I just wanted to get privacy. Well, as I'm listening, like, hey, my battery's also dying. It's so insignificant. You're probably like, oh, that's not a good example. But
devil's in the details, Allison.
Your big emotions are valid, Allison.
Thank you. Literally today, I worked from home, and my internet has been awful, going in and out. And like at one, I flipped at one point. Like, I screamed, I slammed a door, and then that was it. I did like do some healthy behaviors too. I took a walk, and I went outside, took a walk in the yard. And I did tell myself, this is totally out of my control. There's not much I can do about it at this very moment. And I didn't let it consume me the rest of the day. But I did react pretty ugly. Sure. So and like Emily was saying, after I screamed at no one, like, which I'm glad I screamed at no one and not at someone.
The wall, perfect.
But it's still like, oh, if anyone saw that right now, I'd be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And immediately feel regret.
So, Alice, $1 million question. What were you trying to protect when you got angry from the stressful internet issue?
That's what I mean. Like, I don't know if this is that significant because literally it's just symbolism. The internet.
It's symbolism. But I think there's a deeper thing you're trying to protect there.
Yeah. I don't know what it was because I've actually been pretty happy lately.
So,
but this internet thing has been going on for a long time.
You were working from home, right? So your internet is needed for your job.
100%.
So anger is a healthy response to feeling a perceived threat to your work. If your internet goes out while you're working from home, you can't work. Yeah. And that's a threat.
Yes.
So your rage and your anger makes sense to me because of what it is you were trying to protect.
And Alice is the most passionate person about any job. Like,
right. Yeah. You care about your work.
You know, like I can't reach out to people because I can't get their contact information because I can't get on the internet. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
it spirals.
So that's the thing. To help acknowledge anger is to help to validate the importance of the symbolism of what you're trying to protect. Right. Yeah. And the symbolism was you're trying to protect your work and livelihood, not insignificant. Right. The action maybe was small, an internet on and off, but the symbolism is never small. And I think one of the keys of helping people navigate anger is to acknowledge the symbolic power of what feels threatened. Right. Look at the symbolic power there. So perfect example, because a lot of the examples people give, they feel bad saying because they're like, well, I don't want to feel judged for the thing I'm angry about. But the symbolism makes total sense.
So Emily said, I'm assuming that's her answer to what are you trying to protect? Is it
having control?
you're trying to protect like
A sense of control.
a sense of control, like as a mom or whatever.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
But then she also mentioned anxiety, so I'd be interested to know like what that is.
Which again has some pieces to do with control and power, right? Or the feeling
Yeah.
that you don't have control or power. So
Yeah, like I'm
anger-
feeling this discomfort. Mhm.
Right. So anger kicks in to protect that loss of power, that loss of control. So anxiety into anger makes a lot of sense. It's a protective function in that sense, and a survival function.
So then back to your question of like, how do you not cope, but like, how do you?
Well, so Allison, I think talking through the importance of what you're protecting, right?
Yeah.
So if Allison was my patient, and she'd be a wonderful patient to have. If Allison was my patient, I'd be, okay, how important does your work feel? Tell me about what it's like when that work feels threatened. Talk me through how meaningful that work is to you, what the loss would be if you couldn't have it. Then you would start to see other feelings, right? Those other feelings would surface that really creates change from anger to something else, right? Anger to more vulnerability, to care, to all these other emotions that are around the anger. So that's sort of what I'm getting at. You focus the topic towards the protected item, and new feelings will emerge. Because again, Allison cares a lot about her work. She's passionate about what she does. Not having work would be a tremendous loss. And so I think if she was here talking, not muted, she was talking, we could get into a good discussion about that. And then you would see a lot of new feelings.
You know what's really interesting? I just
go
thought of
ahead.
this.
Sorry, I didn't know you need me to.
No, you're good, Allison. I'm just using you as an example.
No, but thank you. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's actually not a bad thing that she cares so much about work. She's always been like that. So better you care than not care.
Right.
Picture her slamming a door.
I want to see Allison punch a hole in the wall one of these days. That's what I'd pay good money for that.
It's funny because so many people are like, I can't even picture you angry. And I'm like, oh, I can get angry.
Oh, she can get angry. That's great.
But everyone does. I mean,
oh yeah.
Like you were saying, there's what was the saying you were saying? Anger is a healthy response to an unhealthy, and then
situation.
Your last situation. Okay.
Right. It's a healthy response to an unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it's fair to say, you know how I said in the beginning, there's like the fear, pain, and frustration as a root I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess we could kind of add like control, because when I think about all the times that I've gotten angry, like it's been out of powerlessness. When we're taught to like embrace that, and it's like so hard because when things like come up as a barrier, depending on what kind of type of personality you have, like I want to fix this, I want to solve this, like it is extremely frustrating. So they kind of like go hand in hand. Like, well, I'm supposed to let go of control, but like we definitely kind of need it all the time.
Well, the funny thing is when we're really angry, we have a greater pain tolerance.
Yeah.
So it's also a way to navigate pain. Rage, when I think of what's the most angry image I can think of, and it's a person charging into battle. And like the medieval battles that were hand-to-hand combat, I wouldn't want to feel any other emotion in that situation than anger. I don't want to feel fear or sadness or vulnerability. I want to feel rage, because I could endure whatever traumas I experienced better if I was angry. So again, it has this really important function. Anger in and of itself is not the issue. It's how often do we require it to navigate through life? How often do we assume a threat that's not there? I think the other thing is, if anger is a protection of a threat and you misperceive lots of threats, you are now invoking anger, which is a very draining emotion, over and over and over again. So how often people feel threatened in some kind of ways is a piece, right? And one of the ways to look at that is, how often do people take things personal? Taking things personal is one of the biggest ways to feel anger, because if you're protecting something, if it's personal. And one of the ways to help with anger is to take things less personal, right? For example, Crystal misspelled my name in the beginning. If I wanted to, I could be like, why don't you care? I thought I was a good friend. Why, like, how could you not know my name by now? I could take it so personal as a symbolic meaning of what our friendship is. Or I could say, yeah, Crystal's probably tired. She's probably had a long day. she made a simple typo because the letter T and R are close to each other. And as a
Yeah.
result, it was easy to do. And that's a huge difference of emotion. One is very compassionate. The other one is already resentful and anger and bitter. So taking things personal. And I think that's something I struggle with. Crystal, what about you? How you doing with taking things personal?
It's gotten a lot better. I used to be like extremely sensitive. I wouldn't show it, but I was. And now I got to a place where my communication has definitely gotten a lot better. It still has work to do, but if I feel like what you said, if I feel like I'm hurt or that I'm getting angry, like I can pick up the phone now instead of cutting somebody off. I can talk to you about it. And that's like huge for me. So I think I'm gonna put it in the chat. For me, it's communicating. And then I read something earlier, like 3 other things that really help. One was being patient with yourself and other people, which that's like really hard to do.
Yeah.
Having an open mind and listening instead of just like, I don't know. I feel like anger makes us just, have tunnel vision and we don't want to.
Yeah.
So having an open mind and listening. And the other thing is empathy.
And the blinders is an interesting part because, again, that makes sense with survival. We can't process too much information if our survival is at stake. We need to have tunnel vision, right? So the functionality of anger doing that makes sense to me. The problem is it creates this awful loop where, because you don't have all the information, you can't combat the assumptions you have about the threat or taking something personal, right?
Yeah,
So
and that goes hand. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, with communication, it's your opportunity to clarify how personal something is. So if someone forgot my birthday, I'm like, God, I can't believe they forgot to call me a birthday. I can get all angry, and then I can call and be like, yeah, my mom died today. That's why I didn't call you. Oh, it has nothing to do with me. So communication can clarify it. Having an open mind allows you, again, not to take things personal. This has nothing to do with you. I got something else going on. It's not about you. Right. So I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
You just made me think of something. One of the ways where we do the exact opposite of communicating is a form of anger, which is being like passive aggressive.
Passive aggressive.
Yeah, I think that's important because sometimes we're either that person or other people are super passive aggressive. And I love giving examples of this, but like, I'm going to leave a plate in front of you when you wake up instead of just telling you like, hey, can you do the dishes?
Yep.
And like right now I could say, hey, can you please do this? Or hey, can you please do that? So I feel like you could do a whole hour.
Oh yeah.
Dude, I know.
Passive aggressive. My favorite is, oh, is that what you're wearing?
Is that what you're wearing? Did you get any? Yeah, you look a little.
Oh, are you not sleeping
okay?
well? Yeah. Passive aggressive. Man. By the way, my favorite thing to do with a passive aggressive person is to talk to them like they're being literal.
Yeah.
Because passive aggressive people don't expect you to respond literally. Right. So they say, oh, are you not sleeping well? I was like, oh, I'm sleeping great. Because I'm not feeding them what they were expecting. So anytime I see someone passive aggressive, I'll just talk to them literally. Because I'm not going to give them that energy. I think it's a trap. Passive aggressiveness is the trap that invokes the other person to get angry so that they can get the thing going that they want going.
Yes. There's a term for this. I don't know if you know it. It's, oh my God, I think I tried to write it down. Like open assertive, I think they call it. Like
open aggression.
Open aggression, is that it?
Yeah, it's the opposite of passive aggressive.
Duh. Okay. So I'm going to put it as goals. How about that? Open aggression is goals.
Well, assertiveness is the healthy one. So you have passive aggressive on the left side, toxic, open aggression, toxic, assertiveness, healthy. And the difference between all those is assertiveness is a clearly communicated thing about needs. Here are my thoughts, here are my needs. Here's what I want.
In a respectful way, yeah.
Aggression tries to dominate the situation. Instead of just communicating what the needs are, they try to convert other people to adapt to their needs. And passive aggressive wants you to be a mind reader and predict needs without openly saying them. So when people are passive aggressive, they're trying to get a need met. They're just not doing it in the way that's the most clear and direct. which is just to name it. So in the dish example, healthy would be, I need you to, I feel upset that I'm always doing the dishes. It would mean a lot if you could do more dishes, is assertive.
Yeah, well,
Passive aggressive is the plate, and open aggression is, F you, will you clean this darn kitchen, right? That's open aggression.
I think it has a lot to do too with us wanting to other people to feel what we feel,
Mhm.
So like, instead of coming to you and being respectful, I want you to feel what I feel, so I'm going to piss you off.
Yes.
And I think that comes with maturity, is to just like be the bigger person sometimes.
Right. That there's other ways for your feelings to get validated than distressing the other person you're trying to connect with.
It's so funny. I know, like, I don't have children yet, but like, I would imagine they would test your patience beyond belief in this like aspect. And the fact that like none of these tools would help, like you just gotta be patient. That's like the only one that would help.
Well, children is a one-sided relationship, right?
Yeah.
So that parenting is, I'm not, got nothing to offer there.
It's just, I know, but it's interesting that like when that's another phase of life that like when we eventually experience that, if we do, like it will be one-sided. And then how do you deal with it at that point? There's something to think about, because right now all my relationships are, all of ours for the most part, are adults, so like you would think that if you are the bigger person, it would get better or it wouldn't be as toxic, but we're not always going to have that advantage,
Yeah.
to be dealing with adults all the time.
Right.
So, all right, well, that was great. I don't know if there's any other tips you have, or
yes, let's see here. I want to
anybody
talk
gaining
about
something out of this. I feel like we should use a little, like, have a little gauge right now, because it's kind of quiet. If you got something, throw out a little emoji. I think
emoji or words. Very, very low standard here. It can just be a winky face. Doesn't matter.
a winky face. Oh, reactions. There we go.
There it is, Allison. Love eyes. Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. I wanted to think about how different people's anger is received differently, right? And I think one of the most archetypals, how male anger looks different than female anger. And on average, how male anger gets praised and female anger gets shamed or criticized more often on average. And I want to know if that's been your experience, Crystal.
I mean, I think we were taught to accept it like more from men.
That, you know what phrase I hate? Boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of this, boys get to have different rules, right? Boys get to operate under different rules. The rules that apply to women do not apply to men, especially when it comes to anger management and anger control. Men, I think, are given way too much of a pass on how poorly, on average, a lot of men manage anger. And when women express anger, again, they're often really shamed or gaslit that the reason they're angry isn't valid, because if they had a valid reason, they would have expressed it more calmly. Right.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to communication. Like, it's really important to let somebody know how, well, I'm speaking from a girl perspective, to let a guy know, any male, it's important to communicate that, like, if what they're doing makes you feel a certain kind of way, like it's important that I'm able to like share that. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I don't know. I feel like if you're able to do that, not that it always helps, but like you said, you don't know how they were taught or like what they grew up around. So if that's the way that they express things, something as easy as saying like, hey, that triggers me what you're doing or how you're saying it, or you know what I mean? Like something as simple as that is a difference between it changing or it continuing. But I think it gets normalized, right? Like,
and you're kind of touching on this idea that sometimes someone has something really good or important to say, but their delivery is so poor because there's so much rage in it. All people do is focus on the delivery and not the content versus delivery is a thing I do all the time with clients. Like, I said this thing and no one reacted the way I wanted. I was like, well, how did you say it? They're like, well, I screamed it with a bunch of profanity. I'm like, well, all they heard was the screaming and profanity. They didn't hear the beautiful message you have.
Yeah.
So this happens in couples therapy. A lot of couples shout talk or just shout. And they'll be like, I don't feel heard. I'm like, well, yeah, because your style of delivering it is so loud, so profound. It's like a bright light. And you're trying to look at a nuanced detail inside of a giant bright light. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't alter the delivery, you're not going to have an effective way to be heard. Yes, Allison in the chat.
Well, and it's like somebody once told me, like the more you go up, the more the other person will go down. So the more someone else escalates and gets angry and yells and screams, the more the other person shuts down. So you're not going to have, they're not going to, like you, Jason, you were just saying, they're not going to hear you.
Right.
Because they're just being screamed at.
Right. Which raises defenses, causes some like dissociation. And again, whatever content you have that's useful is lost by the delivery.
Definitely.
So trying to help people feel that they can be heard more powerfully with a soft voice. I can hear you better with a softer voice, or I can hear you better with a steady voice than I can hear you when you scream. Because again, people want to feel heard when they're angry.
Yeah. Well, these are definitely all like things to reflect on for sure.
Last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Treatment of anger. So
anger management, just kidding.
70s, well, in 1970s, one of the anger management strategies was that people take a baseball bat to a giant like doll that looks like a clown and just beat the crap out of it. And that was like primal release cathartic therapy. And so unfortunately, what happened was all it did was teach people that when you're angry, you should beat something with a stick. It didn't help their anger. It just said, this is the behavior you should do when angry. So modern treatment for anger is to do the opposite behavior that the anger tells you to do. So if the anger wants you to scream, you talk softly. If the anger wants you to curse, you talk. And now they have those rooms where you can destroy everything. That's right. Rage rooms, or I think that's what they're called, or break rooms, something like that. But to actually feel anger is to change the behavior of expressing the anger and to fight the instincts. If you really have chronic anger issues, you want to do the counterintuitive behavior that the anger tells you to do. Because if you keep acting on it, it only gets reinforced. The neural pathways form, they continue to grow. And every time you're angry, you want to do that destructive thing that feels good in the initial phase, but then you feel awful about later.
The guilt, yeah.
Right. So speaking in a soft voice has been my therapy. Learning how to talk quietly or calmly when I'm really angry so that it triggers my nervous system to relax, right? A soft voice triggers my parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. It lowers my blood pressure. It affects my adrenal and cortisol release. All that is part of anger. And then my mind is more clear. So I can actually get to the thing I feel threatened by. Because sometimes I can't find it at first, or sometimes it's not obvious. Only when I relax can I see it. Oh, wait, I'm actually angry because I felt misunderstood. Or I felt like what you're doing was hurtful in some kind of way. And then you can feel that blood pressure drop, right? So anger management, learning how to do the opposite behavior than what the anger wants you to do.
Breathing and writing, those are my two.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mine is usually just sitting. And like, I guess breathing. Just sitting or rocking back and forth. I have a hammock. So when I'm angry, sometimes I'll just swing in the hammock to like self-soothe. Best investment I've ever had was my inside hammock.
I think my takeaway from this would definitely be that it's healthy in some ways, and also like a survival. I only really think of fear as being survival, but I never thought of like anger being a survival thing.
Yeah.
So that's like my takeaway.
Wonderful.
Yeah, well, because it helps you realize like you're human. It does serve some purpose.
Right. It's not pointless.
Yeah.
It's not pointless.
So that's helpful.
Okay.
Well, does anybody have anything else?
Josh or Allison. Not to call you out by name, but you're literally our only two guests. So,
And then there were
yeah.
5. All right.
Excellent job.
What did you say?
Thanks,
Thank
Allison.
you. Excellent job.
Thanks. Well, I guess I will wrap up by saying I will be on one of the social media platforms next week and the following week.
Mhm.
And I have some exciting things I'm working on. So yeah, keep sharing and hopefully you get something out of it. Thank you for your shares, Allison and Joshua.
Thank you.
And as always, Crystal, thanks for inviting me. Again, I get this magical feeling of I'm so glad I do these when I finish them. And I get that wonderful feeling now of I'm really glad I kind of did some research, built this up a bit in my mind, and always get a lot out of it. Even if it's me talking a lot, I still get a lot out of it just because it's thought-provoking and it makes me think. I have to reflect. Before these presentations, I think a lot about what I'm going to say. So it's good for me to hold myself accountable with that. And of course, always love hearing your thoughts on this as well.
No, definitely. Much needed topic. Well, I'm just going to throw out there. Let me end the recording really quick. Hold on. Thank you, everyone.